You're not on the invite, Rachel. That's what Megan from Operations said when I walked into the quarterly roadmap sync, the same one I had led for 6 years straight. She didn't even look up from her glitter-covered tumbler, just kept tapping her acrylic nails against the lid like she was trying out for a wind chime orchestra. I stood there a moment, waiting for someone, anyone, to speak up. But the new VP, Blake, just smiled that smug car dealership smile, clapped me on the shoulder like a high school coach, and said, "Don't worry. We've got the big picture stuff handled. You focus on the plumbing." Plumbing. That's what he called the systems architecture I had spent 15 years perfecting. The plumbing that supported the $80 million multi-year contract with Northbridge Capital, the client we landed because of the compliance framework I built from scratch, the same client who still asked for me by name on every call. But sure, I'll go unclog a metaphorical toilet while you innovate with your LinkedIn fan club. It wasn't ego. I didn't care about PowerPoints or posturing. I cared about execution. And until Blake showed up with his hair gel and imported buzzwords, execution had been mine. I'd spent a decade holding together a tech stack that was one crash away from cardiac arrest, rewriting outdated API contracts in airport lounges, walking execs off the ledge when timelines slipped. I never missed a delivery, never lost a client. I was the glue that kept this circus standing. Everyone knew it, even if they pretended not to. But lately, the glue had gone invisible, and not by accident. You don't get fired overnight in corporate America. It's death by 1,000 access removals. A dashboard you suddenly can't open. A meeting you're not looped into. A junior engineer whispering, "Hey, are you still leading the migration?" Because I heard something. I played it cool, said nothing, made notes. I'd seen this play before. It wasn't my first rodeo. It was just the first time they were dumb enough to think I'd go quietly. But I didn't fight loud. I fought clean. Quiet power. And if you've ever worked long enough in tech, you know the system has more eyes than people realize. I still had back-end access to the AV suite because I'd written the original integration specs for those rooms. I still had admin permissions because nobody ever cleaned up the access matrix. I wasn't hacking. I was watching. And when I walked past Breakout Room C one Monday morning and heard my name followed by the words, "We'll phase her out after the client signs," I didn't flinch, didn't stop, just smiled, because Breakout C was voice-activated, and I'd built that trigger command 3 years ago. One tap, that's all it took. The room listened while they whispered. I walked away knowing the glue had teeth. The next day, my dashboard went blank. Same desk, same coffee, same 6:12 a.m. log in. Only this time, access denied. Please contact admin. Like I was a stranger in the system I built. I tried the staging mirror. Nothing. Pinged our PM, Jenny. She sent back a nervous smile emoji and nothing else. That emoji said everything. 5 minutes later, I was kicked from Slack too. No goodbye, no warning, just gone. 15 years of clean delivery history deleted by a man who thought synergy was a leadership skill. I didn't cry. That's not my style. I just stared at the ceiling tile above my monitor, the one shaped like Michigan giving the finger, and thought, figures. By 9 a.m., my calendar was wiped, my name gone from delivery plans, my whiteboard replaced with a pastel vision board that looked like someone ate a box of crayons and threw up inspiration. Everyone avoided my eyes, pretended I was invisible. That's how corporate executions happen, quietly, politely, with HR-approved euphemisms. Around 10:30, my junior dev, Mason, slipped by, voice low. "You didn't hear it from me, but Blake said you're being transitioned. They're waiting until after the Northbridge renewal to make it official." Transitioned. Cute word for dumped. I thanked him anyway. Not his fault. After lunch, I took the long way back to my desk, down the west corridor, past the glass-walled breakout rooms. Habit made me glance through the clear panel of Breakout C. Inside, Blake, HR's Jenna, and that smarmy biz dev troll, Evan. Heads close, voices low. We'll phase her out after the client signs. Blake muttered again. Smug. Certain. Jenna laughed. Evan said, Smart. Less noise that way. They didn't know I was 10 feet away. Didn't know the mic above them was still live, still recording, still logging every word for meeting recap enhancement. A system I'd designed. A database I still had root access to. I didn't rage. I didn't storm in. I just whispered, Meeting note start. Save to private folder. Tag Northbridge. And the mic obeyed. The system listened. I walked away with a recording and a plan. That afternoon, I didn't go to HR. I didn't call legal. I just went back to my desk, poured the rest of my coffee into the trash, and opened the admin console. Habit, not revenge. I'd always kept logs clean, daily backups, encrypted archives, redundancies layered like armor. And now, that precision was about to pay off. The recording file was there, saved under the innocuous label Q2 Planning Sync Audio 0416. I copied it to my private folder, stripped the metadata, and renamed it to something only I would recognize. Then I sat still for a long time, watching the cursor blink like a heartbeat. You ever feel that electric calm that comes when you stop pretending? That's what hit me, because this wasn't betrayal out of nowhere. It was math. Cause, effect, consequence. They forgot I wrote the blueprint of the system they just weaponized against me. And buried deep inside that blueprint, in the legal backbone of our $80 million deal with Northbridge Capital, was my insurance policy. Clause 4.2b. Subsection 2. A line no one else had read because I was the one who drafted it with our attorneys. It required client pre-approval for any personnel changes tied to key roles. Guess whose name was listed there as lead integration architect? I wasn't planning revenge. That would have been childish. I was planning verification. Because while Blake was busy trying to erase me, the client's general counsel, Natalie Rhodes, still remembered who built this empire's plumbing. We'd met years earlier at a cybersecurity conference in Chicago. She was sharp, dryly funny, the kind of person who quoted subclauses from memory. Over dinner, she once told me, Rachel, you're the only reason we didn't walk after your last exec shuffle. I remembered every word. So that night, I did what I always do when the system breaks. I fixed it quietly. I opened the recording, cleaned the file, trimmed silence, normalized the audio. You could hear everything. Blake's laugh, Jenna's smug, less noise, even the ice clinking in Evan's overpriced cold brew. It was perfect. I scrubbed every trace of my own credentials, reset the timestamps, and saved it clean. No trail. Then I drafted an email. No subject, no body, just the file attached. Recipient, n.rhodes@northbridgelegal.com. I hovered over send for maybe 3 seconds, not out of doubt but discipline. Then I clicked. That night, I poured myself a glass of cheap bourbon and sat at my kitchen counter, staring at the glow of my laptop. 2:14 a.m., empty inbox, steady pulse. You ever realize how peace feels like clarity, not calm? That was me, because I knew by morning everything would move without me lifting another finger. The next day started quietly enough. Sunrise, black coffee, inbox empty, until 8:13 a.m., when the first Slack ping popped up in the QA final channel. Anyone know why Northbridge just paused all test environment access? I didn't reply. By 8:27, the channel had turned into a digital riot. Legal tagging procurement, sales tagging delivery, everyone typing, deleting, retyping. Panic makes people forget how to spell. Then came the private messages. Rachel, are you still managing compliance contacts? Rachel, did you see this? Rachel, urgent. Call me. At 9:02, the first emergency invite hit. Alignment call. Urgent. I declined. Then another email dropped, this time from Northbridge's admin alias. Subject line: Contract review pause. Body: Per compliance directive, all renewal activities are suspended until further notice. Direct all questions to legal. No explanation, no apology, just a full stop. By 9:15, the panic had spread like wildfire. The renewal, 5 years, $80 million, 3 departments, and 2 executive bonuses, was frozen. A line of code and a single clause, working exactly as written. I just sat there, sipping coffee, watching my monitor light up with chaos. At 9:37, one short message appeared on my screen. From Natalie Rhodes, thank you. Watch for a call. No emojis, no fluff, just precision. That was the moment I knew the tide had turned. Blake didn't. He was still probably pacing in his office, practicing leadership framing. He had no idea that Section 4.2b had already gutted his playbook, because the minute they tried to transition me without client consent, the contract self-triggered a breach review. At 7:00 p.m., the emergency legal call went live. I wasn't invited, but I joined anyway. Camera off, mic muted. The gallery filled with faces. Our legal team, Northbridge's counsel, 2 board members, and Blake, sweating, pale, pretending to be composed. Then Natalie joined. Every square on that call froze just a little. She didn't smile. She didn't greet. She just said one sentence. You need to revisit your master service agreement, Section 4. The silence afterward was surgical. For 3 whole seconds, no one moved. You could almost hear the collective pulse spike through the speakers. Our general counsel, Mitchell Green, scrambled like a man searching for an oxygen mask on a sinking plane. Pages rustled, keyboards clacked. Someone whispered off mic, "Wait, is that the personnel clause?" Natalie didn't flinch. She sat perfectly still in her square on Zoom, calm as a surgeon. Section 4, she repeated. That's all. Mitchell finally found it. He read the line aloud, voice cracking halfway through. Any substitution, removal, or reassignment of named key personnel without prior written approval from client shall constitute breach, resulting in immediate contract termination and associated penalties. You could see his finger tremble over the page as he hit the words immediate termination. And there it was. My name in black and white. Rachel Mercer, Lead Integration Architect. The one name they had erased from the project plan without telling the client. Blake's face went gray, the kind of color you only see on overboiled chicken. He looked to Mitchell like he might be rescued, but legal wasn't throwing lifelines tonight. Natalie leaned back in her chair and said nothing more. She didn't need to. The silence was its own kind of verdict. The call ended 6 minutes later. No wrap-up, no next steps, just a gallery of faces realizing all at once that they'd detonated an $80 million deal. I closed my laptop and exhaled. Not relief, not joy, just a steady, grounded kind of justice. For years, I'd been the quiet one, the fixer behind the curtain. And now, the curtain had fallen. The next morning, the entire building felt off. You could taste the panic in the air. Conversations stopped when you entered a hallway. HR had commandeered 2 conference rooms, and legal was suddenly unavailable for in-person consultation. Blake's assistant was crying in the kitchen before 10 a.m. By noon, rumor had it the board had called a closed session with outside counsel and security. That's what a 7-figure penalty clause does. It rearranges the power dynamic in real time. They thought that clause was just legal padding, boilerplate language no one reads. What they didn't realize was that I'd written it myself, word by word, years ago. It was the insurance policy I never told anyone about. By 2 p.m., I saw the Slack threads morph into something else entirely. Revisionist history. We never formally approved the reassignment. It was a misunderstanding. The integration lead position was still technically open. Cute, desperate, predictable. Blake tried to pin it on HR in a memo to the board. HR countered in a leaked thread blaming ops. Ops blamed sales. Sales blamed executive miscommunication. Legal started every sentence with, "To be clear," which is lawyer speak for, "Don't you dare drag us into this." At 3:11, a new message hit my inbox. Subject: Join us in conference room Delta. No context, no tone. I knew what it was before I opened the door. Inside sat Blake, Mitchell from legal, and board member Sandra Myers. The kind of woman who could fire you with a smile and call it realignment. They didn't offer small talk, just gestures toward an empty chair. Blake looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was unkempt, his tie half loosened. "Rachel," he started, voice brittle. "We'd really value your insight right now." I said nothing. Silence does the heavy lifting in moments like this. Mitchell jumped in, fumbling for diplomacy. "We're trying to reconstruct the personnel transition timeline. Any documentation you could provide would help us stabilize the client relationship." Sandra cut in, voice tight. "Not formally, of course, just consultatively." I looked at all three of them, men who'd dismissed me as operational overhead, now clinging to the wreckage I had quietly predicted years ago. I smiled, just a small, calm curve of the lips. "I'll let Natalie handle it." Then I stood, thanked them for the untouched coffee, and walked out. The silence behind me was absolute. You could have dropped a pen and heard it hit the table, because they all realized it at the same time. The furniture they'd ignored had been holding up the roof. Outside the conference room, people watched me pass like I was radioactive. Slack lit up again. Pings, questions, requests. "Rachel, can you clarify the audit clause? Do you have the client's vendor key? Was that your language in Section 4? I replied to none of them. At 4 p.m., the board meeting started. Doors closed, blinds drawn. I didn't go. I didn't need to. The fuse was lit, and I'd already walked away from the explosion. By the time I left that day, the office felt less like a workplace and more like a pressure cooker with fluorescent lighting. The air was thick with fear and coffee breath. You could hear keyboards clattering like panic had a rhythm. Blake's assistant was still pale, muttering into her headset. Legal's door was closed. HR's door was locked. I walked out through the lobby without anyone meeting my eyes. Funny how the people who once called you essential suddenly can't look at you when the walls start cracking. It had been 5 years, almost to the day, since the Northbridge contract first landed on my desk. I remember because it was snowing, and my furnace had died that same night. I was wearing 2 sweaters, typing red lines while wrapped in a blanket, trying to stop my pipes from freezing. I wasn't lead architect back then, just a senior analyst with a reputation for being too detail-obsessed. That was exactly why the execs dumped the contract on me. They figured I'd bleed on the margins, make it clean, and disappear. They were half right. The original draft from Northbridge treated technical staff like spare parts. Vendor reserves the right to reassign personnel at its discretion. I stared at that sentence for a long time. I'd just come off a disaster rollout for another client where sales had swapped out half the integration team midstream. The client walked, the project tanked, and my boss blamed documentation. I spent 3 weekends cleaning that mess. I wasn't going to let it happen again, so I crossed out that line and wrote a new one. Section 4. Key Personnel and Continuity Safeguards. Any substitution, removal, or reassignment of named key personnel without prior written approval from client shall constitute breach. I added penalties. I added timelines. I made it airtight. Legal didn't even notice at first. They were too busy fighting over liability caps and indemnity limits. When they finally did, Mitchell tried to push back. "Isn't this a little rigid?" he'd asked. "It protects both sides," I told him. "Clients value stability. We can't keep treating people like replaceable code." He shrugged. "Fine, just don't make it a habit." But I did make it a habit. That clause was my anchor. It said, "This person matters. And if you're smart, you don't just write the rule. You name the people." Appendix C listed 3 roles: project executive, senior technical lead, and lead integration architect. I typed my own name on that line, not out of ego, but out of survival. When Natalie saw it during the negotiation, she didn't blink. In fact, she added language reinforcing enforcement triggers, mandatory penalties for any unapproved personnel change. "We've been burned before," she'd said over Zoom, wineglass in hand, eyes sharp. "So have we," I'd replied. We both smiled because we understood each other perfectly. Years passed, deals closed, titles changed, budgets tightened. But that clause sat there, waiting. It became part of the foundation. Everyone forgot about it. Everyone except me. And now, years later, when Blake's ego collided with my foresight, it detonated like a mine under his career. That week, Northbridge didn't just pause the contract. They terminated it, officially, cleanly, and per Section 4, the penalty was brutal. $2.75 million in liquidated damages payable within 60 days, plus loss of service exclusivity for 2 years. And thanks to Schedule C, the breach had to be disclosed publicly to regulatory partners. No hiding, no quiet fix. By Wednesday morning, the company stock was down 9%. By Thursday, it hit 11. Analysts started sniffing around. The press release went out. Sterile, hollow. Viridian Systems regrets the breakdown of a key client partnership and is restructuring executive leadership in response to market volatility. Everyone knew what that meant. Blake tried to spin it, held a meeting at noon called Path Forward. Only 4 people showed up, and 2 were interns. He drew boxes on a whiteboard no one cared about. Someone asked if travel budgets were frozen. He ignored it. Someone else asked if Northbridge was coming back. He said, "We're optimistic." His voice cracked on the word. I watched from the hallway for maybe 10 seconds, then turned away. You can't teach someone who never reads the manual. By Friday morning, the office had gone from tense to hollow. The chatter was gone, replaced by whispers and the shuffle of resignation papers sliding across desks. Even the air vents seemed to hum slower, like the building itself was tired. HR moved into lockdown mode, hiding behind ongoing review statements. Legal commandeered the executive floor. People were saying words like liability exposure and breach remediation, but nobody really understood what they meant. Blake was nowhere to be found. His office lights were on, but he wasn't in them. In the midst of it all, I kept my routine. Same coffee, same desk, same rhythm. I wasn't even technically supposed to be there anymore, but nobody had officially removed me from the system. It was corporate purgatory, and I'd learned to be patient in purgatory. At 10:11 a.m., an email hit my inbox. Subject: Board access, client termination discussion. 2 sentences in the body. Per client request, the board is scheduling a direct session with Viridian Systems regarding the termination. Rachel Mercer, please attend for background context. Background context. That was cute. They didn't want my context. They wanted a scapegoat who looked competent enough to calm a fire. But I wasn't there to save them. I was there to watch them burn from the spark they struck themselves. The call was set for 8:00 a.m. the next day. I logged in from home, coffee in hand, camera off. The gallery filled slowly. Board members dialing in from vacation houses, faces pale in bad lighting. Mitchell from legal looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. Sandra from the board sat straight-backed, her voice already clipped and brittle. And then, one by one, the Northbridge team joined. Natalie Rhodes, calm as ever, flanked by 2 deputies and their head of procurement, a sharp-eyed woman named Grace Wu. "Thank you for joining," Sandra began, her tone rehearsed. "We'd like to discuss how to—" Natalie interrupted without even looking up from her notes. "You've lost trust. The breach is clear. We're initiating termination per Section 4. The sentence hit like a gavel. No raised voice, no drama, just precision and finality. Sandra tried to pivot. "I'd just like to say that this came as a surprise." "No, it didn't," Natalie cut in, her tone surgical. "The clause is unambiguous. The named personnel were reassigned without notice or approval. This triggers both termination and penalties. Outside counsel has been briefed. Formal disclosure will be filed by week's end." Blake opened his mouth to speak. Something about intent, miscommunication, procedural misunderstanding. But Grace had already muted her mic and started typing. She wasn't listening. No one was. The conversation was already over. I sat there quietly, off camera, watching the dominoes fall. Watching the people who'd sidelined me scramble to find footing that wasn't there. Mitchell flipped through papers like they might rewrite themselves. Sandra's posture cracked under the weight of inevitability. Blake's shoulders collapsed, as if gravity had just remembered him. Natalie closed the session with the same poise she'd opened it. "This was a courtesy call," she said. "You'll receive official notice today." "Thank you." Then she clicked out. Her square went gray. One by one, so did everyone else's. When it was over, no one spoke. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. The only sound was the faint whir of someone's ceiling fan and the paper in Mitchell's trembling hand as he reopened the printed MSA, reading the clause out loud like a confession. In the event of unauthorized removal of named key personnel without prior written approval from client, the agreement shall be considered in breach, resulting in immediate termination, liquidated damages of $2.75 million, loss of exclusivity for a period not less than 24 months, and mandatory public disclosure. He paused, voice breaking. "Oh no," he whispered. That whisper was the sound of every smug smirk, every dismissal, every just focus on the plumbing collapsing into dust. Everyone turned toward me, eyes desperate, like maybe I had a rope hidden somewhere. But I didn't move. I didn't meet their gaze. I just reached out, calm, deliberate, and closed my laptop with a quiet click. The sound of a curtain falling. No one stopped me. No one spoke. Because they all finally understood. The clause they ignored was mine. The system they dismissed was mine. The end they feared had always been built into the foundation. By me. No one called after me when I walked out of that boardroom. No one dared. I passed a line of cubicles where people pretended to type, eyes flicking up just long enough to register that something irreversible had happened. That's the thing about corporate collapse. It doesn't arrive like thunder. It seeps in, quiet and slow, until you realize the ground beneath you is gone. The following week, I sent my resignation. 2 lines, no quotes, no drama. Effective. Friday, I resigned my position at Viridian Systems. Thank you for the opportunity. No one responded. Not HR, not legal, not Blake. Maybe they didn't know what to say. Maybe they thought silence would make me disappear. It didn't. That same afternoon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message read, "Rachel, this is Natalie. Let's talk next week. Retainer terms attached. Congratulations." Attached was a short PDF outlining a consultancy agreement. Independent Executive Integration Advisor. Twice my old salary. My own team. Full autonomy. No approval chains. No middle managers with vision boards. Just clean accountability. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. Not in disbelief, but in recognition. This was the natural conclusion of a very long equation. I hadn't set out to win. I'd just refused to lose. And in doing so, I'd rewritten the rules of engagement. Blake lasted 3 more weeks. He wasn't officially fired, just transitioned, then reassigned, then erased. I saw his company laptop boxed up by IT one Tuesday morning, rain streaking down the glass walls of the lobby. No goodbye party? No "we'll miss you" Slack thread. Just quiet removal. The internal memo dropped later that day. Viridian Systems is undergoing structural realignment to better serve future client partnerships. Translation: we're bleeding and the board's in triage mode. 2 VPs resigned within a month. Legal hired outside counsel for damage assessment. HR started sending out anonymous morale surveys no one filled out. The stock kept dipping. 11% down, then 12%. Analysts on investor calls asked about personnel continuity risk. Everyone danced around it. No one said my name, but they all knew what the trigger was. 3 weeks later, a press release went out. Viridian Systems regrets the loss of a long-term partnership with Northbridge Capital and is implementing leadership changes to align with operational integrity goals. The market translation was simple. They broke the wrong trust, and the world noticed. That night, I came home to find a package waiting at my door. No return label, just a florist's sleeve with a cream-colored envelope tucked inside. Inside, a bouquet of white lilies, eucalyptus, and one vivid blue orchid. Attached card for Section 4. Natalie, I laughed. The first real laugh I'd had in months, loud, unfiltered, the kind that burns out the last of the anger. Then I poured myself a drink, set the flowers on the window ledge, and watched the city flicker below. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was symmetry. The same company that once dismissed me as back-end noise had fallen because I made sure the system had a backbone. The same contract they'd skimmed had become the sword that cut them down. Not revenge, accountability. I thought about that first day, standing in the hallway as Blake told me to focus on the plumbing. About the years of holding everything together while others took the credit. About every subtle dismissal wrapped in corporate politeness. And I realized something. Power doesn't come from titles or invites or glossy slide decks. It comes from knowing exactly how the machine works and leaving a failsafe only you can read. They whispered behind glass. I wrote the clause. Now they whisper nothing at all. The next morning, I signed Natalie's agreement. A clean start. Same field, no noise. Before closing my laptop, I typed one final line in my personal notes. Words I'd been waiting 15 years to write. They built their empire on my work. I built my freedom from their collapse. I hit save, closed the lid, and let the silence finish the story for me.